First, President Ramaphosa and his predecessor, Jacob Zuma, are squaring off in court today. Ramaphosa, to remind you where we are, wants the court to block Zuma's private prosecution bid. While Zuma claims Ramaphosa is an accessory after the fact in alleged criminality by prosecutor Billy Downer. So where are we on this? What is the expectation? Here's my colleague eNCA's Moloko Moloto joining us this morning at the High Court in Johannesburg. And first of all, I suppose the entire country wants to know, Moloko, before we get to the details, are we expecting to see either president inside the courtroom?
Well, good morning, Gareth. It is unlikely that you will see either of the two men, the President Cyril Ramaphosa or the former President Jacob Zuma, physically present in court, because this is not a criminal case. It is a civil matter, and they really are not under any obligation to be present here. They possibly will be sending their legal representatives to be arguing on their behalf. But perhaps if I can just give you a picture of what's happening outside the Johannesburg or the South Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg, and this could also be giving you an indication of whether those two VIPs will be coming here. There is really not much activity. Firstly, you don't even see the supporters of either of the two men chanting outside court here, or even just being present. But also, even in terms of security, you don't see much really. Instead, you only see the Johannesburg Metro Police officers who are only controlling the traffic here, not really doing much, except that you have these two police officers in uniform. But in court, really, that should not be coming as a surprise to see uniformed police. But you know where the president is, or where the former president is, usually you will see the VIP or the Presidential Protection Services. And even at the entrance, I mean, the entrance, there is no access control. People walk in and out as they wish in this area. So there is no indication. Of course, we will wait to see whether these two powerful men will be present in court. But let's just maybe remind our viewers what this case is all about. As I said, this is a civil case. It actually stems from the criminal case which the former President Jacob Zuma had initially instituted against journalist Karen Mon and the prosecutor, a top prosecutor, Advocate William John Downer, mainly or generally known as Billy Downer. And it's about that case where Mr. Zuma had wanted the NPA to charge these two, arguing that they had actually leaked his medical certificate. He argued that Advocate Downer SC had leaked it to News 24 journalist Karen Mon, and that was in violation of the provisions of the National Prosecuting Authority Act. Now, he obviously did not succeed in that the National Prosecuting Authority refused to prosecute those two. Now, Mr. Zuma then decided that he would go after President Cyril Ramaphosa. Why? Because he argues in his court papers that the President of the Republic is an accessory after the fact, in that Mr. Zuma wrote a letter sometime in August 2021 to the President of the Republic complaining about Advocate Downer, to say that he wants President Ramaphosa to institute an inquiry or an investigation into the conduct of Advocate Downer and or some of the officials within the NPA. And the President responded in writing to say, I have elevated or directed the Minister of Justice to deal with that matter, and also to report it to the relevant law practice council. Now, obviously, we know an inquiry was never held, at least up to now. So Mr. Zuma then decided, on the basis that the president did not institute an inquiry into Advocate Downer, He then says the president is an accessory. The president is also trying to defeat the ends of justice. That is what the argument by Mr. Zuma is, and he wants the president to be held accountable. And in terms of what Mr. Zuma believes is that the president, if found guilty in the criminal court of law, will have to spend 15 years in jail. Of course, that is not that criminal court we are talking about. What is now happening, what brings us here today, is that the President of the Republic, upon receiving a summons by Mr. Zuma on the 15th of December last year, just on the eve of the ANC National Conference, that summons was instructing President Cyril Ramaphosa to appear in the South Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg on the 19th of January as a criminally charged person. Physically, he has to be there. Now, Mr. Ramaphosa, the president, then approached the South Gauteng High Court to interdict Mr. Zuma from proceeding with that private prosecution, because you would recall Mr. Zuma is privately prosecuting the president. That is part A of the president's application that is before this court today. Part B is that the president wants to challenge the validity and the constitutionality of the non-prosecution certificate issued by the National Prosecuting Authority, specifically by the Director of Public Prosecution in KwaZulu-Natal, which basically says that the NPA is refusing to charge any person with regard to Mr. Zuma's complaint regarding the alleged leaking of his medical records. Now, for a private prosecution to be carried out, you require that certificate. So the president is challenging the validity of that particular certificate, saying it doesn't speak to me, it doesn't implicate me, I was not part of the people who leaked that particular medical record. But also the president is challenging the validity of the summons that were issued by the Register of the High Court to Mr. Zuma. He is saying that it actually violates a certain provision of the law. For instance, he says that there is no proof of payment on the side of Mr. Zuma, because if you are pursuing private prosecution, you must deposit certain amount of money, because if you lose the case and there happens to be an order for you to pay the cost, that money ought to be there already. But also the president is saying there are two summonses that were issued, one on the 15th of August by the same Register of the High Court. The other one was issued on the 21st of December 2022. Two summonses summoning him, the president, to appear before a criminal court in this High Court in Johannesburg. So the president is saying the validity of the November 21 summonses, it should not have issued if the 15 December summons was still standing. Mr. Zuma ought to have withdrawn that 15 December summons if he wanted to issue out the second summons. So basically in court today we're going to hear the arguments from both sides. And on the other side, of course, you have the former president arguing that this is an abuse of legal processes by the president of South Africa, who he says wants to create an impression that he must not be held accountable because he is the #1 citizen of the country. So those would be the arguments, and we don't know whether there would be judgment today or in the coming days that will determine whether Mr. President Cyril Ramaphosa will be in court on the 19th of January to answer for that criminal public prosecution.